So welcome everyone to our first monthly jazz photography conversations. The list of upcoming few sessions is available on JJ News, and they will take place at this time, which is noon Central U.S. Central Time, and they're usually on Saturdays, either the second, third, or the fourth Saturday, depending on the month. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce Adriana Mateo, who is a music photographer, award-winning music photographer, and she has been active mostly in New York City, but she's based currently in Buenos Aires, which is her native city. Adriana, you're also a teacher. I've taken lessons from you, photography lessons. How did you get into photography?
Hello, everyone. I am a second generation of cinematographers in the family. My father was a film director and a director of photography. So I started at a very early age in photography and later on into cinematography and lighting. And I did later on a master's degree in film and directing as well, and cinematography with Laszlo, Andrew Laszlo, and Robert Draper, besides my father in the States. And I graduated in my master in film in New York University in New York. And I have to correct that I do reside now back and forth, yes, but I'm not based in Buenos Aires, but I am spending 3-4 months and back and forth, and also in Italy.
What made you take up jazz photography specifically?
I think I chose music early on, and it was during a show that my father was the director of photography at the theater with Bossa Nova, Elis Regina, the singer. And at that time, I was my first time, I think I was around 12 or less. And I was at that time backstage. And when I saw that from backstage, I said to my dad, that's what I'm going to do. I think he thought singing, thanks God it wasn't. So that's, I think, it's when I saw that inspiration and I went on that direction subconsciously, even though I was photographing anything I could as a child. Now, jazz comes afterwards. I think it's a question in two parts. Jazz comes because I was doing my master's degree in NYU. And at the time, when I finished my classes, I had to present also a thesis, as we all know, and a short. And I wanted to be a documentary. And I also wanted to do a documentary. At the time, I was really into film. I thought it was going to be film. And I started hanging out after school in NYU in the village, Washington Square. I started going to Bradley's and all these places that we were so lucky to all meet in the 90s, where Roy Hargrove, Antonio Hart, Christian McBride, Jeff Tain, we were all, Willie Jones III, it was Benny Green. We were all at that time in New York. We had all moved in. And I think I was the only one I was the only one in that was not in music. So I started to go, and I fell in love. I really fell in love. That was the theme I wanted to pursue. And I started taking photographs. So to create my documentary, it was going to be a film, and it ended up being a film of photographs. So and in there, I was giving away my photography to anyone I meet to see what they think, to connect with people. And in there, I also got afterwards to meet great mentors like Frank West, Jimmy Heath, Peter Walton, Dave Brubeck. I mean, I just got to meet a lot of other people later on through these young lions. And that was the period and how it started.
Other than your dad, who else has influenced your photography?
I believe it was by seeing the albums at home that my dad had of jazz. My father liked jazz very much, as well as tango and bossa nova. So there were a lot of albums at that time at my home, and a lot of artists coming in and writers at the house, because my father was an artist. So there were many, I have to say, albums from photos of William Claxton. And I was starting, because of my age, of course, being very influenced by Herman Leonard. But I was taught into the Hans Ansel Adams technology. So the lighting and the technique I use is Ansel Adams, and it was taught to me by my father. So what I teach and what I learned is through the Ansel Adams technique, and it's which comes from film. I started in film, of course, and I did a transition into digital, but I come from film. So the technique is the technique used, taught by my father, by Ansel Adams, and then I think that I adapt that technique influenced by all these covers of William Claxton and Herman Leonard, whom I had the honor to meet in person in New Orleans before he passed.
Okay. So based on that technique, what type of cameras or equipment do you use currently?
Currently, I'm using digital. I'm using digital currently mostly. I use film, but I'm mostly using for the high end resolution. I'm using Hasselblad, and this is a Hasselblad camera, which is medium format. That's why the photos are so large. They can be, they have so much detail. And then I am using a Canon camera, which I love. It's a Mark. And this is a very good camera to use at night. And also, there are moments that you can't be using this because this is it has to be extremely steady and firm. And this is more. So these are, right now I'm using these two. I don't carry anything else. I don't carry 1,000 lenses, and I don't carry any more than this.
Okay. So no type of stability like a tripod.
No, I don't use it. No, if it is a studio photo shoot, of course, I would use a tripod. But no, not on live and not on festivals or any situation. In studio, you can use a tripod, certainly.
Okay.
But I think the studios are mostly records, which I've done. Cedar Walton's we all know many records, covers, and mostly are live. So you have to be very steady because you can't have a tripod.
Okay. And you use those two lenses?
Right now, I am using 35 to 90 in medium format.
Mm-hmm.
And I am using a 24 to 300 right now on my Canon. I have switched from as any artist, I have went through periods of different lenses.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing the Hot House magazine, there was a need to use another lens because the subject would be sitting in front of me. But lately, I've been using this lens. It may change if things change. That's the lens. It is a very important question because I think that the personality of the photographer is defined through the choice of his lens. Because the choice of his lens really defines his identity. So it's not a lens that may be good for him or her or them. Every photographer has its own identity and personality, and it is something to discover for him or her, or by the mentor or by the teacher. Because everybody has a different way to see things through his lens. We can be all on a pit, we're 100, and we will all take, or some of them the same photo, some of them all different.
Okay.
I think it is quite important that framing and lenses defines it almost more than the camera. I mean, you can use an Nikon, you can use any camera, any brand. I don't mean here. I don't know if I should say names. I apologize. But I think you can use. It doesn't have to be the latest camera. For me, sometimes it's just much more important that you use a good lens, that you frame well, and that you use within that camera that is not the most expensive, that is not the best, that you use the right technique, that you know your camera. Like if you know your bass or you know your drum, know your camera, know your lens. I don't care how expensive, how it is, in that sense, no?
And what about any flash or fill-in lights or anything like that, or you just use natural light?
I don't use any flash because at the time that I started photographing, it was at night, only at night. I could only photograph at night in the club. And it had been a gap of silence in photography because Herman Leonard had died. And then there were some photographers around, but not consistently every night in every club. There would be a certain club because they worked there, but I was going to every club. So there was no way I could use the flash. So I found that my camera and the lens, and the speed of my lens and the technique to get the light hit faster the mirror so I can get that picture. So I became very well. I am more known for my also night photography, which is so bright, but it really is no flash being used.
Okay. For those of you who joined us a little late, I'm Harai Rotarian. I'm a JJA member, and I'm an amateur photographer. And this is the first of monthly series of conversations with jazz photographers we're having. And today we're featuring the work of Adriana Mateo. Tell us some of the highlights of your career as a photographer.
I think I was just very blessed of the timing in life. It's not something that I could have planned or that could happen again. I was just there at the right time and at the right place. There was 3 generations all together. We were all together in New York. And it was just like you wanted to be there every night and in every session, every time. And luckily, everyone that I got to meet that mentored me or gave me the opportunity or chose me to portray them have passed. And we still have the new generation and the generation of my age, like I said, Benny Green, Christian McBride, Jeff Tain, Antonio Hart, and Rob Hargrove, who just passed recently. But I had been blessed with Dave Brubeck, with Jimmy Heath, with Frank West, Mr. Weston, Lee Konitz, and with each one of them, and there is a story behind, because they were really mentoring me. They were asking me to do their birthday, or Ron Carter, Tony Rollins, my God. So I was just blessed. There was nothing else I could do than do it. My heart couldn't do anything else than be with them. I mean, and each photo has a story, each one of them. I could be here doing one session about one story about each photo that would take hours, because we would see it, we would confide, we would hear stories, and it's just how it happened. That's how it happened. From the 90s.
You have connections also in Italy, Padua and Genoa?
No. I don't have any connections anywhere. I didn't have any connections in New York either. I meet everyone in a bar at Bradley's, one of them. Then Sweet Basil was many others. But no, I was discovered at Newport Jazz Festival by Carlo Pagnotta and Enzo Capua, and by Gabriela Piccolo. And these are festival creators in Europe, one in Padua, the other one in Umbria. And they saw my work, and they published my work in Europe, also in Germany. I was discovered in New York by a German producer who put my work before the pandemic in Germany. So all my work came from working in festivals and clubs in New York, or albums, of course, records, photography, websites, or portfolios of musicians. So I do not know. I met them, all of them, in the U.S., and that's when I started traveling around the world: France, Italy, Germany. That's basically.
Okay. So we have one question from the audience before I pull up your photos and to discuss them. How do you deal with the poor lighting in nightclubs?
It's an excellent question. Become friends with the bar owner. That's the best advice. I mean, yes, it is. I mean, at the beginning, it was really, really a lot of patience and a lot of knowing which moment to photograph. And then I recommend really, really getting in touch to whom and where you're going to photograph. Herman Leonard did it, and he told me. And I was shy, but I started doing it. So I went to the Blue Note, as Herman Leonard told me, because Herman Leonard would put his light. So after meeting him, I was taking photos at the Blue Note and at the Zinc, and I will ask permission to speak with the lighting person and see if he could help me a bit that night or during a certain moment in the set to just sometimes use just one color, maybe white or maybe just blue instead of being blank, all these colorful. But in total honesty, your camera and your technique shall be able to break that down, and you should be able to photograph by controlling your color and temperature and the white balance in your camera. And that is basically what I am teaching right now, because you can't handle that. You can't interrupt a person in lighting. You can't get in everybody's ass.
Mhm.
So the importance is that you know your camera, and that you own a camera, that you know you can control the color temperature, and that you know you can control the white balance. It's important to have a fast lens. So if you learn how to control those factors within your camera, you will be able to do in post editing few corrections, few aberrations of color correction. But mostly your photo could be used in color. Sometimes it's necessary to transfer to black and white because the aberration of colors are not being able to be done. But you should be able to do, because I do a lot of black and white, so people say, oh, can I use my color? Yes, you can. You should, I apologize. You should be using your color temperature and white balance before you get to your show, whether it's at daytime or nighttime. Very important. Extremely important in digital.
So let's that's a good segue. Let's talk about some of your photos. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. So this is the photo that won Photo of the Year, Jazz Journalist Association Award in 2019, correct? And
correct.
This must be a very bittersweet photo because it's one of the last taken of Roy Hargrove.
Yes, it was. It was my last photo. I did take some photos of him at Smoke after these, but this was the last really public, important theater photo taken of him. After this, he did not. He did go to Paris. I don't know if there are some photos of that for his birthday, and he passed. So it was a very, very, at the moment, it was bittersweet. Looking at it today, it makes me so happy that the Jazz Journalists Association has preserved this photo. It's so important. The preservation of jazz photography is so important. And I encourage everyone to join the association, because it will only inspire other people to photograph. We can mentor, we can preserve through it. And when you mentor someone, it's not the same as teaching. When you mentor, you are taking that person, you're viewing all the possibilities that person has. You're not teaching him. You're letting him know, or her, what are his or her talents. You're helping him or her in that. That's a mentorship. Then you can teach them. You can teach them technique, but you should never correct. You should help them discover their identity. In the same way that when you photograph a musician or someone or anyone that you photograph, you should discover, you should be able to grasp, take that out, that he or she has. That's when a photo has emotion. That's when a photo has identity. And I think that moment was very special that day with Roy. He was already a bit fragile, and he sat at the piano, and I just felt that that's how was his home. The piano was surrounding him and that's how he was going to live and die. He lived and died his life in music. And the piano contains all that inside. I think it's like a magic moment I was gifted to have.
So this next one is one of my favorites of yours.
This was very funny because I remember this one. I have to tell this little story. I don't think I will get to the rest
Yeah.
of them, but I had to do this one because this was, so I am at Umbria Jazz, and of course, I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous because it's Sonny Rollins. I mean, I wasn't nervous about the photo. I was I just wanted Sonny Rollins, my goodness. And so I get to be backstage. I get to speak with him. I get introduced by the festival founders and promoters, and it was a lot of responsibility. So I like to talk to the permission and said, I mean, the old-fashioned stuff that we do. And so I just go to Mr. Rollins backstage and said, sir, I'm going to be one of the many that are going to be in the pit taking your portrait, but this is for Umbria. And I don't know what I say. I said, well, if you're able to take the photo when I look at your lens right straight on, then you're good. So I remember that I was on the pit with hundreds of colleagues that are lovely because we're all friends, many good friends in there. I was just, did he really say he's going to look at my lens and I have to wait, or he was joking? And he really did. So I can't believe that he could look at me, because we're so many on that pit. It's a huge stage. So I click, and I think I was sweating and sweating and sweating, and I couldn't, until I get to my room and download it and see, oh, I got it. It's there. So this was his last performance. So I think he was, this is his last public performance photo. He never performed after this photo. So it is for me, these two in the order you put them, I don't know, but I didn't know, but there's a third one, but this was very meaningful to me. And because he's a very good friend of the latest Jimmy Heath, who mentored me and wrote the foreword of my book.
So I'll pull up next Jimmy Heath's photo to share.
Well, you're just looking at him, you just get to just be in total bliss and happiness, because being around him was dancing, and we were so many with a big band and his old friends, and it's the best time of my life, best years of my life, with the All Stars Dizzy Gillespie big band, with the Jimmy Heath big band, and Little Bird was all the stories backstage, and it's more about more than my photos. You just already inspired when you were going to photograph him, because he wouldn't stop talking and telling stories from so long ago. I mean, that, you know, he just, we would speak even when I had to travel weekly. He would speak weekly with each one of us. He would stay very, very close with all of us. And he would call you when there were photos and shows and everything, like even if necessary, twice a week, and let you know, so you will go. And I will go for sure. I probably have more photos of Jimmy Heath and Roy Hargrove than any other musician.
I love that you can actually read the notes. Even though the paper is so white, you can clearly read the notes. And I like the little touch of the box of reeds next to him.
Yeah, that is a very good observation, because one of the tendencies when we are photographing is to blow the white. It's very difficult to photograph in black and white, because the whites have two musical notes written on them. And if you can't read the notes, it's just a white patch, and it's very bothersome. So it's very important when photographing in black and white that you acknowledge your white balance before, and in every room that you enter, you have to work quick, check on that, and make sure that that is in order. Um, and this photo is it's just a beautiful moment because that's the backstage of the Blue Note, and that was his birthday celebration. So he was telling stories, and that's a very typical phase of him talking. He's had his famous that he always wore that coat, and that hat. Very, very
And
beautiful memory.
another really beautiful portrait is this one.
Well, with Cedar, I had the honor to work the last 10 years of his life, not previous to that. And I was able to do his last album, The Bouncer, with High Notes. And this is a photo that he had asked me to do. I was his personal photographer for those years. I would follow around. And this photo was absolutely selected by him to be taken, perhaps not the lighting, perhaps not the mood, but yes, the posture. But he was wearing everything. He wanted something very, very simple. He's not wearing a suit, which he always did. He's wearing just something simple and dark. And we talk about some Rembrandt lighting before, meaning like in paintings, darkness and light. I think he was trying to show that harmony and light and darkness. And I think that was what we were looking after in this photo both. So it became a very special photo for all of us and for him and I. And this was the photo that Martha, his wife, who's a very, very dear friend, chose for his ceremony and his mass at St. Peter's Church. So it's a mass card as well. And it's also it's also on his last album. But I do have many, many photos of him, of course. He was an incredible mentor along with Jimmy Heath. Both of them influenced a lot my career.
Another really dynamic photo you've taken.
Yeah, this is on during his birthday. I was at Newport Jazz Festival, and Mr. Brobeck asked me to take a portrait of his birthday, and it was so different from the backstage to the stage because he's very, very quiet. He was very quiet, and he on the stage. Oh my God, it's like an army. All his energy is like a whole army. So it's like, wow, it just breaks through your camera. It just goes through your lens. He just walks inside your camera with that big energy, sound, and smile. At least that's how I felt Dave Brubeck, you know, like as a funny, like a person that would look at you and check you out, or Jimmy, you know, make you so happy that you are really happy to go take the photo. So everyone gives a different energy for you to be inspired before you go out there and do your own art, your own interpretation of their energy, because it is only my interpretation of their energy, of course, different for any other photographer.
Yeah. And one of my all-time favorite musicians.
Ooh.
Also tragically left us too soon.
Well, we were together at Umbria Jazz. This is taken at the Teatro Morlacchi. And it was a four pianists. It was amazing because there were four large pianos. Like if you look from above, it was like butterfly. And in there was Benny Green, Kenny Barron, Eric Reed, and of course him. And I think that besides doing the show, we had prepared these photos because he was thinking Mulgrew was thinking on an album, on a new recording. So because I was there, we were talking, and he says, well, why don't, of course I did the photos for Umbria, and then this is why we should do some photos for my album, my next album. And this is one of the photos for his album. I had worked with him, with Roy Hargrove. I had done a recording that I have the photos are archived when they played together. But he wanted to do this album, so I did the photos. And this was in 2013. We flew back together to New York, the same plane. We talk about them, we look at them, we were on the plane, and it was fun. And I said, well, I get in touch in New York, and then I was never able to get in touch with him because a few months later he passed.
Mm.
So very gentle, very kind, young. It was a shock. It was a big shock for all of us to lose Mulgrew.
Here you also incorporated the audience in your photo.
Well, this is when I incorporate the audience, it's because musicians, when they are playing, they have a language, they communicate between them. That's the beauty of a photography. When you have more than one musician, is that they're talking to themselves. I mean, you know, they look at each other, they signal each other. It's a way of talking. Sometimes or from the notes, but the public, when it's that kind of energy, evolving energy, the public gets very engaged, and it's like they are part of it. They become almost as musicians because they're so involved. It's so, the energy is just so beautiful that it becomes all one. The lens, the camera, the musicians, the public. It's just a oneness, and it's so powerful when you see that through your lens. You can't skip to lower your camera and not include them. Part of that energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the musicians feel that they're playing for them, so they are a part. The public is a part of it, and when they see the photo, they also should see themselves. The public also sees themselves. How the public shows how they felt about them playing. So it's a lot of information doing that. I like to do that a lot when I can.
Nice. Here's a great moment you've captured.
Yes, this is at Newport Jazz Festival. I never had a really as close relationship as I had with Cedar or with Jimmy or Mulgrew or Roy or any of the others, but very, very friendly, because very, very kind man. And I talk a lot with him, spoke many, many times with him, quiet, in many opportunities. And this time I was just working at Newport, and he asked me to please, what's his birthday coming, and he just asked me please to take a particular photo when he was listening to his band, like honoring his band. I mean, so we spoke about it, and I just say it would be an honor. I mean, and I really did follow what he wanted me to photograph. Same as with Peter Walton in that photo. They kind of asked me what they wanted to be transmitting to in that photo. Not that I necessarily would never know if I did it 100% because they are not here to ask them, but I tried. And that was a conversation I had with them previous to the portraits, what they were looking for me to capture. If there was anything in particular they wanted to the audience or the posterity, the next generations to see. And they said, well, I want them a photo where not I am playing, where I could see how important it is for me, my band, to listen to my band.
Yeah.
And that is the story of that photo. And it was, for me, yeah, an important moment. That one too. I forgot about that. Yes, that one too. Actually, this photo also, Mr. Frank West, it was his birthday. And he said, I want a photo of my birthday on the piano playing the sax. I said, okay, sir. And he chose it. I mean, he said, but he didn't tell me when. So I had to be, of course, it's the morning that we were on stage and practicing and to the show. This did not happen at the show, as you can tell. So, but he took the time to say that he wanted a photo of the piano one day. So I have to be all day waiting until he sat up the piano, which he did, and take the photo. One of the sweetest men I ever met. And there's a photo I did not submit, but there's a photo of him with Jimmy playing together, which is one of my favorites.
Mm.
I always like two musicians, or Lee Connors. Very, very, this is backstage at Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. And he was teasing me a little bit on this photo. I can see it a little bit on his gesture, on his face. And I was trying to do a style of portrait when they're not necessarily playing. He was reading the paper, the shows, and I, he asked me to take the photo. He basically posed himself, sat, and I took his portrait. This is Hasselblad. And I think it's in there where, of course, if you can afford to buy a great camera, you can do it. But for historical reasons or preservation, it's good. But that's why it has so much detail, his hands and everything, because it's the floor is a very high definition camera.
Before we go to the last photo you gave me, can you tell us a little bit about how you use the angle from which you're taking the photo?
I think that once you have a lens, the moment that you know which lens you're using, you know that your lens has a range. Let's say I'm using this camera, like just for easier purposes. So I know my lens has this range. So there aren't many places I can go, but all these that this lens has, and they're marked here or in between. So if the person is sitting like in the position, let's take the photograph of Lee Konitz there. I know he's right next to me. Or I either go myself backwards or I go closer. So that it's important you know your lens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the angle, it's the lens.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know geometry, lens, depth of field. It is the most important thing in photography. These are the technical parts that should be really, really taught. What is the depth of field in a 300, in a 50? How far are you? What is going to be seen? All the background blur and him in solid. I mean, if you do not know what is the depth of field of that lens, it is adamant that you learn lenses. Mm-hmm. Then you choose what angle, because you already know what lens you're doing. So you're already so used. You already know by eye. This is 2 meters, 1 meter. I want everything in focus. Let's say a William Claxton style, everything mm-hmm. in focus. So Herman Leonard would be a black noir more style that I have. But mm-hmm. let's say this one is more a William Claxton style, very, very much, that photo. So that photo, I know that lens, everything, I want everything in focus. I want the background, I want the front, I want everything in focus. So if I want
so very similar focus, to this photo.
Sorry?
Very similar to the Randy Weston
very
photo.
Similar to this, yes. So on all these photos, it's just extremely important that when everyone that is starting to learn photography goes through asking their teacher, what happens in that lens? What is the depth of field in that lens? Why would you use that lens? You have to teach them. Why? Because I am the boss. I have the camera. I'm going to tell the people what to look at. So mm-hmm. whatever I choose to frame is what people is going to look at. Mm-hmm. So it's not about an angle. It's about you knowing what do you want to show about your subject. Photographing a flower would be the same. What do you want to show? Do you want to know, or you want to tell a story of the public, the musician, the instrument, or do you just want him? So you mm-hmm. have to make very sure you understand what is the message that you are going to give. Choose the lens for that. Know the depth of field of that lens. And then you know, because you know the distance, and then you would choose an angle, up mm-hmm. or down.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I explained correctly.
Yeah. And this is the last photo we have. Is this backstage as well?
Yes, this is definitely in Detroit, and it's mm-hmm. backstage. And this is his birthday. And this year I have a whole entire hard drive of this because it's Jimmy Heath, whom I travel with, Mr. Western, Roy Hargrove, Ron Carter Nonette and Quartet, Freddie Cole. This was an amazing 2016 Detroit Jazz Festival, and it was his birthday. So we were celebrating his birthday, and this is his birthday photo. I mean, I don't know. I guess people. Roy had a different style, but Roy would be with his bow tie, but this is what he wanted. Mm-hmm. I did mostly when I took the photographs of them, their last photo of their birthday, which just happened to be, they mostly chose to how to see it or where. Mm-hmm. I did not have much say in to capture the gesture or whatever. He's very relaxed and very comfortable before 5 minutes after he was on stage for 2 hours.
What, before we open up for questions, one final question from me. What advice do you give people who want to get into this field?
Jazz or
Jazz
photography?
yeah.
Jazz photography. Jazz photography is fascinating, number one, for me. So I think that the advice that I give is that they need to understand jazz music a little bit. It is important that the photographer, whichever theme he chooses to photograph, knows his theme. If you choose to photograph horses or flowers, you have to know about it. So I do recommend that people that start, that they learn music, because it helps a lot when you photograph. If you're photographing a big band and they are playing any composition, any standard, and you know the standard, you know when it's going to be a bridge, you know which instrument is next, the sax, the bass, you know the music, you know you can read the music sheet. You don't have to be a musician, you don't have to be an expert, but it would be helpful if you know a little bit about music, because you move faster through, and you would be able to take better photographs, because you won't miss, because you know that already if the sax is finishing up, it has 3-4 more notes and the bass is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on a station where you have to go to the other side because you're on a pit on a festival, that is a big help. You're going to get photos that other photographers don't, just because you know more about what is coming in the music. So the same in recording. If you're recording inside a studio and you are, every musician is inside a box. And if you're allowed inside the studio with headphones and not making noise and all the rules that apply, you should know what they're playing. Because I can't be running from room to room. I have to be knowing who's coming next. So among my duties is to know the music, but I'm not necessarily saying the person has to go to music school to become a photographer. I'm just saying that it will help that the newcomer, the new young photographers understand a little bit of music, or the thing they're going to choose to photograph.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Any questions for Adriana? You can either ask her directly or you can type it in the messages and I can read out. Sue is saying that I took a master class with Annie Leibovitz on masterclass.com, and she said many things, but it seemed to me the most important was when she said you have to learn how to see. What do you think?
You have to learn how to
see. How to see.
I don't know what she tried to say. I mean, in my view, there is no other way to take a photo that you have to look with the heart. The photograph doesn't come from your eye. The eye is already there. The camera is already there. You already learn your technique. You already got the teacher. It has to come from the heart. It has to be a connection to absorb the moment, and anything else, nothing else exists. So I don't know if that's what she meant, or I'm not sure. I never took a class with her or know her. I mean, I wouldn't, but it's a contemporary. But I always say, and I had a workshop called Photographing from the Heart. And I think that's how we did Tito Walton's photo. And yes, all the technique, everything, I can teach you everything, but I cannot teach you that you feel the photo, that you feel the music, that you hear the music, that you feel the expression, or that you have a feeling at all, whichever it is for you, different from any other. I can't teach you that. I can mentor you and I can help you discover that on you. But yeah, it's a good question. I think that if that was Annie Leibovitz was trying to say, I agree on that.
Yeah. And Sue says, agree, it's the relationship with the artist as well, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my case, I had always, all the jazz musicians that I photographed, I had a relationship, even if it wasn't a friend, was a colleague at least, or I had worked many times with. After a certain period of time, the jazz scene is not that big as in other areas, but I still think that you have to photograph from your heart. There's a moment that in order to apply, some people will call it art, okay, or your art, but there's a moment when you have learned, I can teach you everything I know. That is the easiest part. To teach you all I know, I have no problem. I do that a year, 2 years, whatever, I teach you all. But I have to teach you to discover who you are as an artist, help you discover yourself. Because and then, do you have that to see? Can you see the beauty on that? That is unique on each one of us, and it's different on each one of us.
Right. Many new photographers struggle with sharing their work on social media and then being used, shared, uncredited. Many artists post photos but do not credit the photographer. What would your advice be on promoting your work but getting the well-deserved credit?
Well, Fiona, that's a very important question. It's a very good question. I don't know why it happened. It should not happen, because if you go to a show, and even if at a small club, not a theater, and someone is playing standard, they will say standard by, and they will play it. Okay, they're making a mention who wrote the song, and they were we're playing John Coltrane, and so I don't know. I think it's the photographer that has to impose and not be afraid of saying, first of all, it is his right, it's his creation. Of course, if he has permission, of course, if it's allowed, which I assume it is, photos they have to be signed, you know, with the technique of digital. All your photos have to be signed, copyrighted. There's a lot of work, but I suggest that the best, at least what I do, is that I copyright all my work in the U.S. registry, copyright registry in Washington, D.C. So I submit sometimes 4 or 5, 1,000 photos. I pay the fee, it's expensive, but the photos are not only are copyrighted and registered.
What about
now, why
digitally
people don't give
watermarking
you a
them?
credit, Fiona? I don't know. But you know what? You should write under whoever used your photo, not, this is my photo.
It's
what
hard,
about
isn't it?
watermarking?
Sorry, go.
Sorry.
So I was just going to say,
Yeah.
it's hard, isn't it? Because, you know, with my kind of Women in Jazz media hat on, we get artists send us photos all the time, because obviously we want to promote them and share their work. And I would say 90% of the time, they will send all these incredible photographers and they will not mention the photographer. So we have to email back and say, we can't use these photos without the credit. And they will then email and go, oh, it's this photographer, but it's not in their mindset. Like as you say, happy to share their music, but it's equally important, who is it who took the photo? This is creation as well. So I think that there's a shift in mindset for artists as well, to credit you know, everything involved in the process. And this, I find this loads, that artists are very happy and love sharing these great photos, but for some reason forget to credit the photographer. So I think sometimes the mindset of the artist needs to, you know, value, if you like, the photographer just as much as the performer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, Fiona, I agree, and that's why in your IG you do a great job, because you are promoting that. Why it happens, I don't know, because it was a gap between Herman Leonard and my generation, and in that gap, it seems like they lost photography as an art, and I think it's extremely important what you're saying. I mean, they have to give credit, because that person took the photo, that person wrote the song, that person played the bass.
Absolutely,
it's so different.
Yeah. We will win the battle.
What you demanded, and sorry, Fiona.
We will win the battle. As I say, I think it's starting to change, but it's interesting what you said about that drop since kind of the olden days, if you like. You know, whereas photography was very highly esteemed and everybody knew the photographers, and there was a gap where suddenly, for whatever reason, photographers were not known, they weren't promoted, they weren't talked about so much. But I think now that is starting to, with people like yourself, is starting to come back in the forefront. You know, photographers are kind of in people's minds a little bit more now, but there's still a way to go, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Fiona, that I believe it has, because of that gap, it happened. But I think that it is extremely important that the photographer defends that, because he is helping the whole media, the whole musician, I mean, it's just a team, it's a one. And why it happened, that is the only explanation I had found so far. But when I teach, I say to all my students, sign your photo. I mean, I don't understand why they wouldn't. Why somebody wouldn't mention you? It's just good. But I don't know. Yeah. I think it had to do with a lack of education in the process in between when Herman Leonard disappeared and all the new ones of my generation started taking over, which we aren't that young. But for the youngest that are coming up, I want them to sign. I want them to register, organize their work in folders, send them to the U.S. Register, or in Britain, you have yours. There's a worldwide one. You have to copyright the work. Maybe
Thank you so much.
We're lazy for a time. I don't know. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
It's an important question.
A question from Alejandro Tawil. Do you think like someone like Clint Eastwood, who himself plays jazz trumpet, has that quote unquote edge that you're talking about, as shown in his films about musicians, Straight No Chaser and Bird?
I couldn't understand you. I couldn't hear you, the question as well, and I can't read it.
So do you think that someone like Clint Eastwood, who himself is a jazz musician, has that edge that you're talking about? And he's done a lot of films on musicians like Straight No Chaser and Bird.
Well, I think Clint Eastwood is absolutely incredible. I think he has the edge to capture the director. He's an incredible director for me, very good director, as well as a great actor. And I think he had captured that edge. One of the reasons is that Alejandro mentions is because he plays an instrument. The fact that he's also, besides being a great director and a multi-talented artist, one of his talents is music. Yes, I agree with him. Health, of course.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Adriana, for joining us. And thank you Howard, for hosting this. And thank you, the audience. Howard. Please join us July 23rd for a session with Lauren Deutsch. Have a good rest of your weekend. Bye.